Hey, how's it going?
Oh, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Great, man. Great.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank
Hmm.
you very much for taking some time to do this interview.
No, thanks for the time for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad to do it. I'm always glad to be able to promote new music, new bands, and all this stuff. And when I came across the promo for the debut EP for Dead Karma, it instantly grabbed my attention, and I was so happy to be able to do an interview for this because I love what's going on here with all 20 minutes plus. All four songs on the EP are stuff that I listen to a lot, and I can tell by the influences that's going on there, and the other stuff that you're bringing in besides that. There's a lot of great stuff that's going on with here, and it's awesome to be able to talk to you about all of it.
No, that's awesome. I really appreciate it. We're really excited about it. Pretty happy about it. So I'm really happy to hear you liked it.
Oh, definitely. So, with that said, how did this all come together?
Um, well, we've been together as a band for about 2 years, maybe a little more than that at this point. The first couple songs were from a previous band. We initially had, like right now, we're just a three-piece. We had an extra guitarist until we recorded. So there sounds like there's a lot of guitar tracks, but really we just have one guitarist now, which is me. But two of the songs, Space Camero and The Purge, were basically written in a prior band. And then we brought that over with Sean and Jacob on bass and drums, and then sort of tweaked the songs to sort of, bring in their influences and their sound. And then Gravity, Mirror, and Dominion, we sort of wrote together. Those were our first two that was really like a combo effort between all four of us. Um, and then going to the studio, like I said, like we sort of lost our other guitarist and sort of had to scramble because he had all the solos written, and so I had to sort of whip my own together. But it all worked out pretty well. Pretty happy about it. Yeah, in terms of it coming together, it was sort of just like someone would come with a riff, and then we sort of just build on that. Like no one was sort of, here's my whole song and coming to band practice that way. It was very much like here's like a single riff idea, and then we sort of collectively built from there. So everyone sort of got to give their own input, which was really cool. And that's probably why um, each song sort of has its own identity to it, I think. Because it's not just one person's vision, it's sort of the culmination of all of us.
Yeah, and I appreciate that so much. And I can hear different influences and different styles in every song, like you're talking about. Like each of them has their own kind of vibe to it, which I do
Mhm.
appreciate. I mean, especially for an EP, you want to be able to show off like a really good impact of what this band can be. And when you can make it as expansive as it is here, I mean, whether it's something that's much heavier, whether it's something that goes a little proggier, whether it goes more expansive or a shorter song, I mean, you got everything that's going on here, and I'm very excited to see where the band's going to be going from here on out.
Yeah, thanks. The new stuff we're writing, we definitely tried to write even shorter stuff. I think our the shortest song on this is like 4.5 minutes, maybe pushing five. So we've tried to like in our writing since then be like, how can we tighten things up and sort of go both ways? I think we since then we've written a longer song than Dominion, which I think is about 7.5 minutes. And we've written songs that are under three. So we're trying to sort of push each boundary each way. And in terms of the songs trying to sound different, I wouldn't say it's something intentional, but I think it's just, we write what we write, and then we don't sort of sit back and like have a preconceived notion of what Dead Karma sounds like. Um, and I know I appreciate bands where, if you listen to a full album out of the 8 tracks, like they all have their own different distinct taste and flavor, and that's something I appreciate by a lot of the bands that I idolize. Um, and there's a place for like bands where they have their own distinct sound and that's just what they're so good at, but I don't think we really have that, at least not yet. So it's been fun to sort of just, whatever you're sort of feeling or influenced on that given week or month and sort of really hammering that different sound down.
Oh yeah, and it's so important. I mean, especially when you're starting out, not to have everything feel forced. I mean, you want to be able to appreciate everything that you're writing together, seeing what works and what doesn't, and that is the perfect time to be able to experiment to see what works and what doesn't. I mean, whether it's going to be shorter, whether it's going to be longer, heavier, softer, whatever direction that it goes into. I mean, there's no bad ideas until you try them out and see if it fits the band or not.
Yeah, 100%. Like when we first got together, like the previous band we were in, um, it's we were writing a bit, but we started off like we just learned a bunch of old Queens of the Stone Age songs. and sort of had a very stoner rock vibe to it. And then we got into this band and sort of the idea was like, oh, we're gonna write stoner rock, stoner metal, and I wouldn't consider us really like there might be moments where we sort of have that sort of groove riffs now and then, but I wouldn't call us a stoner rock band at all just because that's not the type of music we write. So why try and force that if that's not who we are? It would just come across as really fake and poserish, I guess, to try and fit into a genre instead of just writing it and let other people say what we are.
Oh yeah, and I mean, that is so important as well too. And I'm glad to see the influences of different styles coming through there as well too. And obviously going from one band into another band, you want to be able to have a different identity. I mean, but it's good to see that there were still good ideas from the previous band, because obviously the first half of the EP is songs from that and just changed up just enough to make it
Mhm.
fit what's going on here. Like, how different were they originally from what they are now?
The Purge is pretty close. Um, we had that like a rough demo of that actually recorded, like just on like a phone basically, but it was decent enough quality that we could sort of like keep a placeholder of it. So the Purge is pretty close to how it was originally. Um, but Space Camero changed a lot. The bass was very different. A lot of the stuff we wrote in the prior band, I was playing bass in that band. And then in the Purge and Gravity Mirror and Dominion, I do the vocals, like the lead vocals for that with guitar. So there was definitely a lot of change in Space Camaro. I would say the main guitar riff at the beginning is the same, and the verse is the same, and that's probably about it. But the Purge is pretty close.
So, thinking about that as well too. I mean, obviously there were some major changes that came from you as well. I mean, obviously switching instruments, using your vocals with that. I mean, was that the original idea going into this band that you were going to be covering all this, or is that just a happenstance, or how did that come about?
Um, with the new band, I think we weren't really sure coming back. The other guitarist, his name was Rumman, was definitely going to be a guitarist, and I was sort of in limbo of like I'll play bass or guitar. It just depends on who we find to fill the space. And our bass player now, Sean, I knew him from a previous band like years ago, and I brought him in. And guitar is like my more natural instrument. Like my previous bands, I've always been a guitarist. So that suited me better anyway. And then I've done vocals before. It was sort of just the expectation that the two guitarists would sort of split lead vocal duties, and then Sean would contribute as well. But um, so there, I guess once the other guitarist left, though, that role expanded a bit more, and then Sean has become also a lead vocalist for some, which I like, is because we have sort of that, you know, I'm not always the lead vocalist, and neither is he. So we can have different attitudes, or different. One of us can take on the lead vocal duties depending on what suits the song better, because we have very different vocal styles.
Yeah, and those are some of my favorite bands where it's not necessarily just one lead singer, where there can be other contributors that do different songs or full-on songs or whatever the case is. Just
Mhm.
I think it's always cool to be able to have like different voices in the band, especially if it does work together and maybe one voice works better for one song or one just has more meaning than the other or whatever the case is. I mean, it's always going to be different for everybody, but I love the fact that you guys are doing that. That's so cool.
Yeah, I guess it's important just to make the most of what you have at your disposal. I think Sean and I wouldn't say either of us are the greatest vocalists in terms of our range and talent. And there's some bands where, you couldn't imagine anyone else doing vocals for them because they are that good. But we have differing styles and we're both capable enough. So it's good to try and just use that to the best of our abilities.
So thinking about that, just going a little bit deeper, I mean, obviously, again, just like style changes, lineup changes, everything that's going with that. I mean, once it's pretty much been solidified into a three piece now, like how much tighter do you feel with the other two guys? I mean, do you feel like the band's getting stronger from here? Is there still some kinks that need to be worked out? What's going on with that?
Uh, no, I think it's actually been working out really well. I think our songwriting process is a lot more streamlined. We're a lot more productive. Just, I guess, fewer different voices or ideas, and sort of we can focus a little bit better. We initially were looking for another guitarist to sort of fill that gap, and we've sort of abandoned that because I think we're really happy with the sort of sound that we have, um, and what we've been able to sort of develop as a three piece. So.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see that too. And I've been a part of three-piece bands, and sometimes that's like been the best working relationships because there isn't as many people to have different ideas on, and when you're all cohesive, looking for the same direction, knowing what the band can be, what can fit with it, the instrumentation, whatever the case is, when you have three minds going in the right direction, sometimes that can be better.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I completely lost my train of thought, but yeah, it's really working out well in that respect. And I guess the biggest thing is we have a different mindset when we play live shows as opposed to going to the studio, just trying to like tweak the songs a little bit to sound a bit bigger live as only a three piece, whereas you can use a little more double tracking, or I can write multiple guitar pieces in studio. But Sean's a great bass player who really knows how to use an octave pedal and make his bass sound absolutely massive. So he definitely helps with our live sound. So we can sort of give two different flavors that way. So if you see us live, it is probably going to sound a lot different than the recording, but I think it still sounds good and has a lot of energy.
And speaking of the live shows, I mean, how is that for you? I mean, obviously, again with all the changes that have been happening and stuff like that, but like once you finally figured out what direction you want to be going into with the live shows and making that sound, how's that been working out?
We haven't had too many since we went to a three piece. It sort of coincided with my second son being born, so we were a little busy and then finishing the recording as well. So we've only had a couple shows, but I think in terms of how well they went, we kept it pretty tight and we liked the sound and it didn't sound as I guess thin or empty as I was a little worried of because you never know when you just take a whole instrument out what the end product's going to be. But I think we've made a good show of being able to sort of adapt and switch it up so it still sounds good.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. So, thinking about that as far as the sets, I mean, obviously, I mentioned the whole EP is going to be fitting into the set, but is there anything else that you're adding to it? Is there unreleased songs or covers or anything like that?
Yeah, we used to sort of work in some covers a little bit, but not so much anymore. We have enough. I think we have eight originals in total, so we have four more that are finished. The fifth one's almost done, aside from the four that have been recorded. Our set usually lately has just been one or like two songs from the EP, and then a lot of our newer stuff. Actually, just because the songs we did write on the EP, some of them are a little more um, dependent on the two guitars. So I think when we do have upcoming shows, we tend to play the songs that we have released. So we play Space Camero every single time. Once the Purge is out, we'll start working that into our sets a little more often, and then same with Gravity Mirror, and then Dominion's usually our closer, so that one usually features as well. Um, but yeah, we can sort of have a rotating set list of sort of how we're feeling, and it depends on the bands that we're playing with whether we want to go heavier or lighter.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that instantly grabbed me as well too. And I was thinking about that when it comes in the live shows is just from the four songs on the EP alone, it feels like that you could work with so many different kinds of bands and it'll feel natural. And I imagine that's also the case with the songs that will be coming out at a future date. But it's just like I can already hear that. So that's so cool that you're already thinking about that.
Yeah, like we've played with a good mix of bands from like black metal bands, deathcore to like acoustic hard rock and everything in between. Um, and we've always sort of found a way to make it work. And typically not, it's probably not the best for my voice, but I tend to get a little like over eager when we're playing with really heavy bands and crank the vocals up a bit and sort of make them a little harsher. On the recording, there's not much screaming or growling, but we'll bust that out if we're playing with a lot of metal bands. But that's my background of being a vocalist in a black metal band. So
Well, it's really cool that you want to be able to adapt to the situations like that. I mean, especially when you are playing with heavier bands like that, you want to be able to, have your own distinct sound. But if you can add to the whole experience of the night and do something a little bit heavier like that, that's a really cool way to go about it.
yeah, I tend to try and tell myself before the shows like just play our songs, sound our way, but then you hear the other bands or you just see the crowd getting pumped up and you get carried away with like the energy depending on the show. So um but yeah, it's fun to be able to like, every given night our songs will sound a little bit different when we play them.
So, thinking about that as well, obviously with the live setup, there's a lot that goes into it, and of course, gear is an important part of it. Have you had to switch things up when you're messing with the guitars and amps and everything, to make that sound fuller with three piece?
Yeah, one big thing is I just added a harmonizing pedal. So for some of the more like they don't sound like Iron Maiden, but I call them Iron Maiden riffs, right? Where they have the two guitars in that sort of like, you know, fifth harmony type thing going on. So we have a couple of those riffs, and I've added that in. Like I mentioned earlier, Sean has his octave pedal, his whammy pedal that he sort of makes to make his bass sound really big at certain parts. Um, and just trying to throw in different pedals to sort of just make the sound a little bit bigger if we need to. And it's also made songwriting a little more interesting as well because I've had all these pedals on my board now, and you'd be like, well, they can create all these different new sounds that you weren't really thinking about before as you were just sort of finding your place as rhythm or lead when you had this sort of two distinct guitar roles.
Oh yeah, and the more pedals that you have, it's kind of a double-edged sword because like you mentioned, there's so many new ideas that you can come up with, but it can also be very overwhelming about deciding what kind of tone you're looking for, what effects you want to be able to have. There's a lot that can go into it.
Yeah, I definitely at the beginning probably overdid it and expanded my pedal board way too much, and I've started to scale it back down. I think I've removed two or three other pedals since our last couple shows, and it's definitely streamlined it a bit more. And also, especially for live, like in studio, you can just go wild and do whatever you want. But playing live, I found it was getting to be, you're looking down trying to remember which pedal you're pressing or when, or making sure you're kicking on the right pedal instead of just engaging with the audience. So I've tried to streamline it a bit more and just bring the energy a different way.
Oh yeah, and when I was doing live shows, I would do the same thing. Like when I was first starting off, it's like, oh yeah, I got my full A-piece double bass kit here. I'm just going to be able to set everything up. I have all the toms that I need to be able to create stuff. And then the more that I realized like how much time and effort and ideas that really go into it, especially when you're doing like opening slots, I should just stick with a four piece, just a couple toms, kick, snare, and a few cymbals. It just makes everything so much simpler. I can play the songs the same way on that kit. Of course, maybe not as many ideas, but it's a lot more focused that way, and it just makes everything easier that way.
Yeah, and there's also like, a balancing act of, especially as like an independent band that no one really knows your stuff yet. Like they're not gonna be coming for like, oh, he didn't use that delay pedal during his solo or whatever. It's just like as long as it's tight and has a lot of energy, just streamline it, engage with the audience and put on a good show. And then, if they're really into it, hopefully they'll listen to your stuff. And then they can get all the intricacies.
Oh, definitely. And with the live show, are you guys doing anything to incorporate with the live show? I mean, do you have any lights that fit in with the music, or are you just going with like the basic stage lights, or anything cool like that?
Yeah, we don't really have anything. We kind of just the three of us go up there and try and put on a good like high energy. We played a couple shows where they had sort of lighting that sort of synced in with it, but we don't bring that. It sort of just depends on the venue. Um, the biggest difference is just how excited our drummer Jacob is, because that sort of determines whether we are exactly as long as our set should be, or we're going to be 10 minutes too quick because he can just rip it some days.
Yeah, I was just thinking that in my head is just yeah, there's a difference between a half hour set and a 20-minute set, all depending on how fast and the energy that all goes into it. And
Yeah.
yeah, it all has to do with the one, two, three, four that goes into it, how fast. Oh, I guess we're playing this in double time now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple songs too where we'll get started and then there'll be a guitar break and then sometimes Jacob gets me too excited and I amp it up even more. So he's not always to blame. Sometimes it's me really pushing the tempo. So we're all guilty of it. It
Oh,
gives us
yeah,
more room, gives us more room to add a song at the end.
oh yeah, and that adds to the fun of it too. I mean, sometimes depending on the crowd, like playing a little bit faster can really be a good thing for the show. Like if it depends on the energy, what the crowd's looking for, and stuff like that. I mean, it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it can be a good thing.
Yeah, and oh, for sure when we wrote a lot of these songs, they had a higher tempo, and then for the recording, we definitely dropped it down just to make it tighter. Um, because live you can sort of just get by on the energy, but when you're sort of really listening to it on a recording, anything that gets a little sloppy, and when you push the tempo maybe beyond the point where you're sort of comfortable as a unit, it can get a little sloppier. So we've definitely been more controlled in our recordings, and then in live we can sort of let loose.
Oh, definitely. And going back into the EP, I mean, of course, audibly, there's so many great things that's going on with it. But I really like the cover that you got for the EP. Where did that come from?
That was just I found an artist from Italy named Mirko. He just does album covers, and I saw some of his work and just reached out to him. Was like, "Hey, can you do something for us?" I just sent him the songs with the title, and I said, "Whatever you hear, just I don't want to give you direction. I don't want to sort of control it." And that's what he came up with. My only stipulation is that even though it's called the Space Camaro, I didn't want there to be a car. I felt it was too on the nose. So I was like, just do whatever you want, but no car. And that's what he came up with. And he's like, do you want me to fix it? Any revisions or anything like that? I was like, no, it's perfect. So each single has its own sort of modification to it with its own sort of image that goes along with it. But yeah, we were really happy with the art that Mirko was able to do for us.
Oh, I'm excited to check those out as well too when those become available. I mean, I can already kind of see variations with it when I look at it, like what could be. So that's got me excited.
Yeah, it's sort of just like the focal image is sort of just changed around from sort of the sort of spacey staring out that Space Camaro has, and then the Purge, Dominion, and Gravity Mirror all sort of have their own little, I guess, thematic images sort of overlaid into it.
Ah, so cool. And of course, the EP comes out near the end of August. Is there any plans for like a EP release show or anything else that's going on around that time?
We don't have anything in place yet, but we've been looking to book more shows. We don't have any like a tour or anything like that planned. We have a show in July coming up. But we've been in contact with a few different bands and promoters trying to set stuff up into August and September. So hopefully we'll have something to sort of kick off the EP's release. But in the meantime, we're releasing sort of dripping them out as singles one at a time. Space Camaro's already out. This Friday, The Purge will be released, and then we are releasing Gravity Mirror in July, and then Dominion will come out with the full EP in August. So we're sort of teasing it all the way along and trying to keep people's attention because as an independent band, you got to just, keep people coming back. They're not going to just find you on their own. You don't have that sort of built-in fan base yet.
Oh, it's true, but it definitely sounds like you're going in the right direction with this. I mean, slowly dripping out the songs, playing shows when it's available. Obviously, the work life, family life coming into play, and working on the new material as well too. Whenever
Mhm.
that comes out, and just continuously making sure that the band is going in the right direction, but not forcing things. And I appreciate that. That's the tactic you're going to, whether that was intentional or not. It nothing about this feels forced in the business side or the music side, and I just think it's a good direction.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It's definitely, we just sort of said like we're just having fun and we really just started jamming together. And then the logical thing is like, well, I don't want to just play covers. We want to write our own stuff. And it's just like, well, if we're writing all our own stuff, we should play some shows. It's like, well, if we're doing all this, we should at least record the stuff. And so it was just sort of a natural progression of like, we don't have any big plans or ideas that we're gonna turn careers into it. We're sort of just taking it, we're just trying to have fun with it. But if you're gonna commit the time and effort to it, you might as well try and do it the right way. And I think that's what we're doing.
Oh yeah, and that's what you got to do in 2024 because I mean, when you look at like music trends, there's no real right direction to go into because everything is so separated. And obviously the financial stance, is like everything's out the window when it comes to that. So why not, if you're going to start a band, why not make it the music that you want to play it with people you want to play with, and play shows that you want to play shows with, all of that stuff. You got to have fun with it nowadays. That's the important thing.
Yeah, and I think also now with how active you sort of need to be in social media and sort of interacting with your fans is that if you're not having fun with it and being authentic, they'll be able to tell from the beginning, more so than ever probably. So it's important just to have the right mindset of just like we're just having fun making the music that we want to make and just being authentic about that. And if people like it, that's great. If not, we're still gonna have fun doing it.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's a great note to end on. And I want to thank you so much for taking all this time to be able to talk to me about everything that's going on in the world of Dead Karma. And of course, the EP coming out August 23rd. I love every track on this EP, and I'm so excited to see what's going to be coming in the future whenever that stuff happens. But until then, four awesome songs that are all going to be released by the end of August. That I thank you so much for taking the time to be able to get into the mindset of what Dead Karma is all about, musically, the approach, everything that goes into it, and what to look forward to in the future.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. Really appreciated the conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Before we wrap things up, is there anything else you'd like to mention or plug before we're done?
Uh, Not off the top of my head. I was just trying to make sure I could remember all of our song names and everything that we were doing. No, I don't think so. You asked a lot of good questions and sort of got everything out about us, so appreciate it.